Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to Season 2 of the Pro American Late Model Series presented by Harpoon Design. Tonight, drivers will be taking on the Langley Speedway up here in Hampton, Virginia for the third round of Season number 2. And I have the pleasure of announcing here tonight that this will be breaking the record as the biggest race ever hosted by the folks in the Pro American Late Model Series. Currently have 27 drivers registered for tonight's event. 225 laps will be the distance for the main event here tonight. But of course, first we gotta settle things out with our heat races. As usual, only 22 cars going to be making the main, so a whole lot that these drivers are going to have to be working for here this evening. One of the smallest tracks on the schedule, going to be making for some very tight racing all the way through here for round number 3. That said, already drivers are making their way on down to the starting grid for our first heat race of the evening. So how about we take a look down there and see just what our first starting lineup is going to be for tonight's event. Starting out on the pole for heat race number 1, that's going to be the 12 of Mr. Kenny Tripp, current championship leader at that point. Starting to his outside, out on the outside row front of this race, that's the 33 of Shane Kohlmeyer. Rolling off P number 3 back in the number 85 machine, that is going to be Brandon Kiger, starting it off in the 3rd position. 4th place going to go back to the 23 of Mr. Jonathan Emerson, with Will Salamone rounding out the top 5 in that number 36 machine. Brent Mex in the 66, fittingly going to be rolling it off in 6th position here this evening, with John Friley in the 126 rolling it off P number 7. 8th, going to go back to that 5 machine of Derek Colson, with Mr. Johnny V in the Sim Experience number 26, rounding out our 9-car heat race here this evening. Of course, 27 drivers registered for tonight's event, so got a whole lot of racing on the table for these drivers even before we start thinking about our main event. For now, gotta figure out who will be advancing into the main event and who will have to compete their way in the consolation race. iRacing.com pace cars off, green flag up in the air, and we are rolling here at the Langley Speedway. 15 laps going to be the distance for these initial heat races. Everyone off to a pretty solid start here this evening. Shane Kohlmeyer, Kenny Tripp both duking it out as they cross the line, still side by side. The 2 drivers that started off on the front row of this thing still duking it out. Even a full lap in, now 2 full laps in, and they are still side by side battling for position here this evening. For once, it's looking a little bit like both the inside line and the outside line are viable here this evening. Neither driver budging an inch here. Flipping between Shane Kohlmeyer and Kenny Tripp almost every single time around the speedway. Just behind them, that's Brandon Kiger and Jonathan Emerson also duking it out here. Then single file for a little bit, and then Brent Mex and Derek Colson also 2x2 further back in the back, and it looks like John Friley might also be involved in that second battle. Taking a look back, sure enough, Derek Colson side by side with the 66 of Brent Mex. Mex way up high in that Taco Bell entry, having a little bit more trouble up on the high line than Kiger is. And further up in the field, everyone else getting themselves sorted out as well. And crossing the line, 9 laps left to go here for this first heat race. Kenny Tripp still in the lead without much difficulty. Brandon Kiger moved his way up to position number 2. Shane Kohlmeyer has fallen back a spot here this evening. Everything looking nice and good for the drivers. And I say that, Jonathan Emerson up into the outside wall just a little bit there. And that number 23 machine still has it rolling, not affecting his pace at all. 7 laps left to go as we cross the line. And Derek Colson's around. Caution flag out on the speedway. Derek Colson getting spun around. That's going to bump him back into the final position for tonight's event here this evening. That's going to bring the caution flag out with 6 laps left to go. Of course, caution flags do not count in these heat races, so we will be going green again with 6 to go as well. Let's see if we can't take a look back at that and see what all happened to the driver of that number 5 machine coming out of turn number 3. Looking just behind him, that is the 66 of Brent Mex as they head down the backstretch, go on down into turns 3 and 4. Colson down on the apron just a little bit, and no contact was made. Colson just lost it down below the apron there, not able to get that car balanced the way he needed it to, especially on these colder tires. Having the car down on, or at least below the apron like that, not exactly the place you want to be. Kenny Tripp being scored right now, back in the front of this race. Started out up in the front, still maintaining it up in the front as well. Brandon Kiger just behind him with Shane Kohlmeyer rolling it off in position number 3. Jonathan Emerson back in position number 4. Will Salamone rounding out the top 5 here this evening. Lining up 2 by 2 though, getting ready to go green flag racing once again. Going to be 6 laps left for this first heat race win. The RuggyRacing.com pace car gets rolling again. And the iRacing.com pace car is off. We are going green flag racing once again here this evening. And once again, we find ourselves 2 by 2 throughout the field on the restart. Everyone getting a really solid launch here. Tiger falling back just a little bit on that restart. He's going to lose the position to Shane Kohlmeyer. Up in the 3rd position of this race. Of course, top 5 will automatically lock themselves into the main event. So Will Salamone, the last driver able to make it into tonight's event. He is on the transfer line right now. John Friley, the driver just behind him, trying to see if he can't break his way in. If not, going to have to compete his way through the consolation race later on this evening. Single file all the way around the speedway. Kenny Tripp way down low here this evening. Tripp started out on the front of this one, looking like he is going to bring it home on the front of this one as well. He is the points championship leader coming into tonight's event, and he is not even taking home a win this season. So taking home the win this heat race, going to only be furthering that lead in the championship standings even more. White flag up in the air. Kenny Tripp, Shane Kohlmeyer, Brandon Kiger, Jonathan Emerson, Will Salamone still on the transfer spot in that number 36. And it does not look like he is going to have much to worry about as he comes across the line. Those top 5 drivers all safely locked into tonight's main event. John Friley, Brent Mex, Derek Colson, all going to have to race their way in later this evening in the consolation race. That said, already drivers making their way on down to the starting grid for heat race number 2 of the evening. So let's take a look back down there and see what all heat race number 2 has in store for us. Starting out on the pole of this one, it's the 04 of Tyler Jalbert, the tabletop trio entry, starting it off in the front row of this one. Starting to his outside, that is a rookie driver. That is the Exalta number 34 of Mr. Paul Hartwig Jr. Steven Rex, Mike Sukup making up row number 2. Teammates both on the inside and the outside of row number 2. Sean Patrick in that 17 is going to be rolling it off in his P number 5 with Scott Benedicts in the 88, starting off back in position number 6. 7th, going to go back to the 09 Little Caesars entry of TJ Moon with the Hazib Design number 24 of Corey Blevins rolling it off P number 8. Finally, rounding out this 9-car field for heat race number 2, that's Wesley Ray Jr. rolling it off in the Mobil 165 machine back in position number 9. So second heat race of the evening, once again going to be 15 laps. Once again, the top 5 will automatically lock themselves into the main event here this evening. The remaining 4 gonna have to duke it out in the consolation race to try and score those precious couple of positions to get into the main event. iRacing.com pace car is off though. We're going green flag racing here yet again, and once again, really great starts on both lines here. Some of the other tracks we've been to, we've generally seen the outside line struggle on these initial restarts, but right now, things are looking all grooved throughout the field. You're currently looking down at the battle between Sean Patrick and Scott Benedicts down here for, looks like, the 5th position. So this is actually a battle for the transfer spot here. Scott Benedict stuck up on the high line a little bit. He's going to be falling back a couple of spots as Sean Patrick gets down beneath him. And so does TJ Moon as well. Will Wesley Ray Jr. be able to make the pass as well? Not quite. He's just simply not close enough to capitalize on that little bit of a mistake that Benedict's had. So Benedict's gets it filed back down in line. He's running back in the 7th position this evening. Not a comfortable place to be. He needs to get up just 2 more spots to try and make his way into our feature event this evening. Further up in the field, Sean Patrick's falling back a little bit in that drop and bomb 17. TJ Moon is catching up to him. TJ Moon, Sean Patrick, this is the battle for the transfer position here. So you could more or less say that this spot right here is for all the marbles. Of course, there is always the consolation race. There is the last chance qualifier. So it's not the end of the world for these drivers outside of your top 5. But it would be really nice to be able to comfortably lock yourself into that main event and not have to worry about battling for it later on here this evening. TJ Moon, he is closing the gap in that Little Caesars entry. Little over 0.2 of a second between these 2 drivers. And it's looking like that 09 may be having a little bit of transponder issues here this evening. Further up the field, teammates battling it out. That's Steven Rex and Mike Sukup, both drivers for Dropping Bombs Racing, battling it out to get inside the top 3. Of course, everything above 5th position is just for starting position in the main event, and sometimes that can make all of the difference. So no surprise here that the drivers up in the front of this race are battling it out just as hard as the drivers trying to make the cut into the transfer. Well, the big high fives up in the air though. 5 laps left to go for these drivers to get things sorted out. And TJ Moon, he knows that the water is boiling. He has to get down there and get around Sean Patrick now if he wants to lock himself into the main event, and he's going to go around. TJ Moon around, caution flag up in the air for the 2nd time this evening for an identical incident that we saw in our first heat race earlier. Let's see if we can't take a look back here, get another look at what happened to that 09 driver, Mr. TJ Moon. He was pushing it with everything he had to try and get into that transfer position. And unfortunately, it just did not work out for him quite the way that he needed it to. Looking down at that 09 Little Caesars entry, down below the apron, trying to make the pass, and we've seen it time and time again. Doesn't matter what car it is here at Langley Speedway. If you are down below that apron on cold tires and you are not extremely precise with your throttle inputs, you are going to end up going around. So that is what's going to bring out this caution for heat race number 2. And that's going to send TJ Moon all the way back to the back of the field here this evening. So things are frozen throughout the field. Going to be 4 laps left to go. Once we get the green flag back up in the air, gonna be darn near a little bit of a green-white checker, but of course there is no overtime for these heat races, so it's all gonna come down to what these drivers are gonna be able to get done here and now this evening. And right now, Sean Patrick back in that 5th position, the 17 machine. He is on the bubble. Scott Benedict's going to be the next driver looking to try and get his way into that locked-in spot. That said, looks like we are going to have another lap under yellow just to make sure that everything is all sorted out here. And there we go. Now lights are off on the iRacing.com pace car, so we will be going green flag racing this time by. College Albert, Paul Hartwig Jr. making up the front row, a driver that's been here since round number 1, going up against a rookie driver making his first appearance of the season this evening. As we get through turns 3 and 4, iRacing.com pace car gonna duck it down into the safety of pit lane because things are about to get hairy here, race fans. Green flag back up in the air. Hartwig falling back just a little bit here. Sean Patrick holding on to the transfer position, but he is falling back from the main rest of the pack, and Scott Benedicts is right there. 2 to go as we cross the line. Benedicts is gonna have to make the move in these next 6 corners if he wants to lock himself into the main event this evening. Up in the front, everyone mostly single file. All the dramas for this transfer spot, and he's going to have a little bit of a nudge with Benedict's, not quite enough, or he's going to have a little bit of a nudge with Patrick. But white flag comes up in the air, it's not quite going to be enough. Sean Patrick going to take the final transfer position. Tyler Jalbert going to take home the win of the heat race. Paul Hartwood Jr., Steven Rex, all locking themselves in to the main event. And just like that, it's time for heat race number 3. We've got more drivers we need to get sorted out this evening. So how about we take a look down to the starting lineup for our 3rd heat race of the evening. Starting out on the pole of this one, it's another driver making their first appearance for the Pro American Late Model Series. That's number 42 of Dylan Hahn. To his outside, that's the 83 of Chase Johnson, the driver who took home the win last week at the Thompson Speedway. Starting back in P number 3, speaking of drivers with wins to their names, that is the 77 of Mark Whitley, the Harpoon design entry. He took home the win back in round number 1. He's going to be rolling off P number 3. 4th place is going to go back to the 38. That is Christian Tinkler making his first start here of the season, with PJ Thomas in the 28. Rounding out the top 5. Another driver making their first appearance in P.A.L.M.S. 6th place going to go back to that 19 of David Cannon, with James Tugular in the 57, bring it home P number 7. 8th place going to go back to the track pass entry of Braden Fuller, with Tommy Mitchell rounding out this 9-car heat race. So once again, same deal as we've had for our past 2 heat races. 15 laps is the distance. Top 5 lock themselves into our main event. The rest of them, well, they're all going to have to figure it out in tonight's consolation race. iRacing.com pace car pulling off the speedway once again. We are going green flag racing here tonight. And side by side for everyone in the top 5 here. Call it everyone in the top 8. A little bit of trouble. That looks like that's the 38 of Christian Tinkler stuck up high just a little bit. Maybe got a little bit loose on corner entry there. Still stuck up high as Mark Whitley sends it way down low trying to get around that 38. Not quite the momentum necessary to make it happen though. Battles out further back in the back of the field. This is the battle for the transfer spot. P.J. Thomas holding on to that position, the Bob Sub 28, but James Kugler is right there. David Cannon there as well. Both drivers perhaps going to be willing to use a little bit of the bumper to work their way around this number 28 machine. Like I said, Langley Speedway, one of the smallest tracks that it will be visiting this season. Notoriously difficult to make a move on. And we're clicking off laps quite literally every 15 seconds. So our 225 lap main event, that is going to go by really quickly, faster than a lot of these drivers are going to expect. So these battles going on around the field, especially this battle right here for the transfer position, is going to be a very big deal for a lot of these late model drivers. A little bit further up the field, Mark Whitley, Christian Tinkler battling it out as well. A driver that has taken home a win earlier on in the season, that 77 Harpoon design entry. Battling it out with a driver making his first ever start of the season. But I'll tell you what, experience driving in a single league does not mean everything. Plenty of opportunity to compete in this car in other leagues, plenty of opportunity to compete in this car in official iRacing.com hosted sessions. And I'll tell you what, there are drivers of all skill levels out in this field, drivers of all experiences here in the Pro American Late Model Series, and all of them are putting on a heck of a show here this evening. Looking back again at the battle for the transfer position, and that is going to send P.J. Thomas around. P.J. Thomas around, and it looks like James Kugler also involved in that. That's going to really mess things up for some of these late model drivers, because just like that, the transfer spot has been turned on its head this evening. Let's take a look back at that and see what all just went down for these late model drivers. Looking back at P.J. Thomas heading down into turns 1 and 2 in that 28 Bob Sub entry. Got a little bit loose coming out of turn 4. Had a scrape against the outside wall. Came back down. Came down into James Kugler. And from there was nothing really either of these drivers could have done to stop that from happening. Let's get another look at that. It looks like Kugler also got a little bit loose on corner exit as well. It didn't really have any bearing on the incident at all, but that number 57 also had a little bit of trouble on that corner. So going to be 5 laps to go when we go green flag racing once again for this heat race. But before we get things rolling yet again, here is a quick little word from our friends over at Harpoon Design. So drivers still getting things sorted out here, still getting themselves all lined up where they need to be, trying to get race control content with where they are all lined up here. Lights, sure enough, going out on the iRacing.com pace car. Everyone is happy with where they're supposed to be right now. So we're going to be going green flag racing next time by. Dylan Hahn, Chase Johnson, the 2 drivers that made up the front row at the start of this race, still up there right now when we go green flag racing. Christian Tinkler, Mark Whitley still making up row number 3. So all of the chaos is really happening back in the back of the field here. James Kugler looking like he is actually going to be the driver on the transfer position now. Green flag back up in the air though. 5 laps will be deciding which of these drivers make it into the next, or into the main event. Which one of the drivers have to get sent back to the consolation race. And sure enough, the closest battle on the speedway right now is the battle for that transfer position. Right now, Kugler is holding on to it in the 57 machine. Little bit tightness at quarter entry, and there's trouble. That's Braden Fuller. Braden Fuller making a little bit of contact with David Cannon there, and P.J. Thomas involved as well. Everyone's keeping it rolling. But now Kugler has a bit of breathing room. Kugler on that transfer position has a little bit of room to work with for these remaining 3 laps. Call it about half a second gap between the 57 and those late model drivers behind him. Dylan Hahn still holding on to lead this race without much difficulty. Then it's Chase Johnson, but then Christian Tinkler and Mark Whitley also battling it out. 2 laps left to go, and the white flag going to come out as we come across the line. Just one more time around the speedway to settle the score for this 3rd heat race. And right now, the closest battle is between Christian Tinkler and Mark Whitley. James Kugler back there as well. He has nothing to worry about. Dylan Hahn going to take home our 3rd heat race win. Chase Johnson, Christian Tinkler, Mark Whitley, and James Kugler going to be the drivers making it in to the main event here this evening. And now we find ourselves at the consolation race. This is where it becomes well and truly do or die for these late model drivers. The sun has begun to set. Track conditions going to be shaken up just a little bit. Let's take a look down at the starting lineup here and see just who all is going to be battling it out in this final chance to get into the main event this evening. Starting out on the front row of our consolation race, that's the 126 Sundrop entry of John Friley. To his outside, that's the 88 of Scott Benedict's, the Lucas Oil entry, rolling it off on the front row as well. 3rd place is going to go back to that 19 of David Cannon, with Brent Mex in the 66, rolling it off P number 4. 5th place going to go back to the Hasib Design number 24 of Corey Blevins, with Braden Fuller in the 18. That's the Track Pass entry, starting back in position number 6. 7th going to go back to the 5 of Derek Colson, with the 09 of TJ Moon, rolling it off P number 8. 9th going to go back to the 28 of PJ Thomas, with Mr. Johnny B rolling it off in P number 10. 11th going to go back to that 65, that's Wesley Ray Jr., with Tommy Mitchell in the 6th entry, rounding out this consolation race. The top 7 will be the drivers making up the final 7 positions for our main event tonight. 12 drivers making the starting grid for this consolation race, so we've unfortunately got to eliminate 5 drivers this evening. Green flag up in the air. Let's see who can't get this thing sorted out. And already we have names all over the time and scoring board here this evening, 2 by 2 throughout most of the field. A little bit of contact there between Blevins and Mex, and more contact. That's Braden Fuller actually on the outside there. He's going to lose a couple of positions there. And just like that, Braden Fuller is around in the grass. Yellow flag up in the air, just like that. And I'll tell you what, race fans, this is the 12-car consolation race. Imagine what these drivers are going to be working with in our 22-car main event. Let's take a look back at that one, see what all happened to that track pass number 18 of Braden Fuller. Looking like things are a little bit cut and dry here. Braden Fuller had a little bit of trouble coming off turn number 4. Had a little bit of difficulty going down the front stretch, just kept being loose all the way down there. And heading down into turn number 1, just a little bit nudge with that 28 of, that looks like PJ Thomas. So Braden Fuller not going to be particularly happy with how his heat race is starting this evening, because just like that, he is back at the back of the field, and now he has to work his way through 4 other cars to try and make his way into our main event this evening. John Friley in the 126 still is up in the front of this one though. The Sundrop entry, of course, looks nothing like the real life Sundrop late model stock we all know about, but it certainly is eye-catching and certainly is doing a good job of helping him take home a win, even if it is a win in a consolation race. A win is a win that will give him a little bit of bonus points in the championship standings. And if nothing else, it will start him a couple of positions further up the field in tonight's main event. That said, lights off on the iRacing.com pace car, so we will be going green once again next time by David Cannon, starting to the outside of this one. That's going to be Scott Benedict's, Brent Mex, and Corey Blevins rounding out the top 5 of our consolation race. Still 18 laps left to go, still a bit of time for these late model drivers to work with. So nobody's out of this one quite yet. iRacing.com pace car is off. We're going to try this thing again. Green flag up in the air. We are all rolling, and John Friley off to an amazing start. And once again, 2x2 all throughout the field, heading down into turns 1 and 2. Things looking good throughout the field, but I'll tell you what, these drivers are duking it out with everything they've got. Derek Colson having a little bit of trouble there. He's going to fall back a couple of spots up on the high side and make a little bit of contact with Johnny B there. That's going to bump him back even further. Now he's duking it out with Tommy Mitchell in the Menards entry. He's all the way back in the 10th position, just like that. And now P.J. Thomas, who was involved in that incident, is looking to try and get up here as well. And speaking of drivers back here, just behind P.J. Thomas, that's Braden Fuller, the driver that had that incident with P.J. Thomas earlier in the race to bring out that first caution. So, oh, that's big time trouble. That's Tommy Mitchell, who just ate the inside wall. Looks like the caution's not going to come out. We are still rolling. Tommy Mitchell looks like he might have some severe damage on that number 6, and here come the leaders catching up to him just like that. He's got it down off the racing surface, so I don't think we're going to see a yellow flag come out. Sure enough, everyone's still rolling, and we are staying green. But I think it's fair to say we need to take a look back and see what happened to the driver of that Menards entry, because that was a pretty nasty impact coming out of turn number 4 and having trouble on the front stretch. You see him there in the Menards entry, going down below the apron just a little bit, and sure enough, just about a repeat of what we saw both in heat races 1 and 2, but we still have it rolling. Green flag still up in the air, 12 laps left to go, going to be 11 when we cross the line, and Scott Benedicts is your new race leader. Looks like John Friley has fallen back 3 positions now. David Ken and Scott Benedicts both managed to get around him. Maybe a little bit of trouble back in the back. P.J. Thomas, Derek Colson, and Braden Fuller all duking it out back here, back in the back of the field. 10 laps left to go. Like I said, top 7 make the main event, so right now that would be Johnny B on the transfer line in that 26 entry. He's got a little bit of room to work with, but he has 4 very hungry race car drivers just behind him that are all going to be trying to get up with everything they've got. But the caution flag is out for the 2nd time this evening, and it looks like it's going to be for the 18 of Braden Fuller. It looks like Braden Fuller might have had trouble again. I don't see a lot of damage on that track pass 18, but the truck is saying that Fuller was the one that brought out the caution. So let's take a look back here and see what exactly happened there to bring out our 2nd caution of the evening. Heading down into turns 3 and 4. Oh, and just a little bit of a nudge from the 28. That's P.J. Thomas again, so that's the 2nd time now we've had a little bit of contact between Braden Fuller and P.J. Thomas. If I had to guess, Fuller is probably not very amused by that one. Let's take a ride on board with Mr. P.J. Thomas going into that incident. Riding on board with him here. Going down into turns 3 and 4. Coming out on the front stretch, and just a little bit of a nudge, and that's all it took to send Braden Fuller around. So just like that, 2nd caution of this consolation event. Both near the back of the field. They really haven't shaken up the front of tonight's race all that much. But of course, remains to be seen how these remaining 9 laps are going to play out. In a track like Thompson, To be quite honest with you, anything could really happen here. Lights still on the iRacing.com pace car though, so we will be heading around the speedway one more time. At least one more time, probably going to be 2 more if I had to guess. So saying that, we will be back in just a moment. Going to give our friends over at Harpoon Design a little bit of a shout out for all the work that they do here for the Pro American Late Model Series. Lights are out on the iRacing.com pace car, so we will be going green flag racing once again, this time by 9 laps left to go, so should be 8 when we cross the line. Scott Benedix, David Cannon, your drivers on the front row of this one. iRacing.com pace car's off. We're going green flag racing again, and Scott Benedix getting an absolutely amazing jump on that restart. Benedix just like that, building up a nearly 4/10 of a second lead over David Cannon, which is a pretty big deal on a track as small as this one. And throughout the rest of the field, we have, for the most part, single filed out here. Currently back on the transfer line, still that 26 of Mr. Johnny B, the driver back in 7th position. As long as he can hold on to that spot, he will make it into the main event. Thomas Mitchell has brought it down on the pit lane though, so it looks like Mitchell has called it an evening. So that leaves Coulson, Fuller, and PJ Thomas as the 3 drivers all battling it out. Brett Mex as well, all trying to make it into our main event this evening. 5 laps left to go. Derek Coulson closing the distance on Johnny B. He just has to get around that one late model to make his way into our main event as the final driver. Johnny B not going to make it easy though. But with 4 laps left to go, these drivers really are on the clock here, and Johnny B has a lot to worry about. There is a freight train of drivers just behind him. Braden Fuller sent it in deep there. He almost made contact with Coulson just a little bit there. But you can show just how much these late model drivers are pushing their cars here. 2 laps left to go. 8 more corners to determine who makes the main event and who has the misfortune of packing it up and heading on home and having to wait to next week to try again. White flag up in the air. Scott Benedix leading this race. Johnny B still the driver that's in the final transfer spot. And he's going to close the door on Derek Coulson. Johnny B going to be the driver that makes it into the main. Scott Benedix going to take home the win for this last chance qualifier. And just like that, drivers going to start making their way down to get ready for our main event. But for the moment, going to give them just a couple of minutes to get everything sorted out in their cars, maybe take a quick bathroom break and make sure that they're all properly hydrated. So we will be back in just a moment, race fans. Don't go anywhere, because we will be getting ready to start our 225 lap main event this evening. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the Langley Speedway, and welcome back to the Pro American Late Model Series presented by Harpoon Design. Just had 3 heat races and a consolation race put in the books here this evening, and now it is finally time for our 225 lap main event here this evening. And of course, before we get things rolling, gotta take it on down and take a look at our starting lineup. Starting out on the pole of round number 3, that's the number 12 of Mr. Kenny Tripp. Starting to his outside, that's the 04 Tabletop Trio. That is Tyler Jalbert, starting off in position number 2. Third place can go to that rookie driver, that's the 42 of Dylan Hahn, with the 33 of Shane Kohlmeyer in the Haas entry, starting it off position number 4. Fifth place can go back to that 34 Paul Hartwig Jr. with Chase Johnson back in the 6th position in the 83 machine. 7th place can go back to that number 85 of Mr. Brandon Kiger with Mike Sukup for Dropping Bombs Racing, starting it back in position number 8. 9th place can go back to the 38 of Christian Tinkler with Jonathan Emerson rounding out our top 10 here this evening. 11th can go back to the Dropping Bombs number 10 of Steven Rex with the 77 Harpoon design of Mark Whitley starting off in position number 12. 13th, going to go back to the 36 of Will Mr. Salamander Salamone with Sean Patrick in the 17 starting off in 14th. 15th, going to go back to the rookie driver James Kugler in the 57 with Scott Benedicts in the 88 rolling it off position number 16. 17th, going to go back to the 19 of David Cannon with John Friley in the 126 Sun Drop entry, starting it off 18th. 19th, going to go back to the Little Caesars entry, that's the 09 of TJ Moon with the Hasib Design 24 Corey Blevins starting off in position number 20. Then Wesley Ray Jr. and Mr. Johnny B rounding out the rest of the field here this evening. Green flag up in the air for the 5th time here at the Langley Speedway. And this time it is for all the marbles tonight, and Kenny Tripp off to a pretty dang good first lap. He's got a bit of room to play with here, as that sounded like Shane Kohlmeyer up into the outside wall in that 33 Haas entry. Not what you want to be doing early on in this race. There is still a long way to go here this evening. Sure, we are clicking off the laps plenty fast here tonight, but still don't need to be scraping your car up on lap number 2. Things getting sorted out in the front of this field for a decent little bit now. Further back in the field, that's Chase Johnson in the 83 battling it out with Brandon Kiger and Kristen Tinkler. Tinkler almost making contact with the back of Johnson there. But it's like I've been saying, Langley Speedway only 0.38 miles in length, or 0.63 kilometers for those of you who use metric. This is a really tiny little bull ring. Brandon Kiger going way up high in turns 1 and 2 there. He's going to have to fall back a position. Not enough for Tinkler to capitalize on the little bit of a mistake there. And it's looking like, for the most part, everyone getting themselves sorted out there, but Steven Rex just came out of pit lane 7 laps down, so it looks like Steven Rex might have had a little bit of trouble. Whatever it was, it looks like Steven Rex actually took the tow, and that's what's putting him 7 laps down here. So difficulty for the driver of that number 10 machine. That's got him moved all the way back to the back of this 22 car field. He's got a whole lot of work he needs to do to get back up into the front of this one, and he's going to need 7 cautions to get himself waved back around into the front of this thing. That's not going to be an easy task. Further up in the field, Mark Whitley in that 77 getting a whole lot of pressure from all sides here. The Harpoon design entry, and there's trouble. That's Jonathan Emerson around. Yellow flag up in the air. Jonathan Emerson pointing in the wrong direction here on lap number 10. That's going to be the first caution of the evening here at Langley Speedway, and I'll tell you what, that's going to give Steven Rex a lap back. So Steven Rex Still not in a great situation, but now he's one caution closer to being put back on the lead lap after that trouble he had starting off tonight's event. But for the time being, let's take a look back and see what exactly happened to that number 23 to bring out our first caution of the evening. Looking down at Emerson, he's on the outside of Whitley here, coming out of turn number 2. Backs up just a bit to get down on the low line, and that's the 57 of, it looks like, James Kugler. Sending it in there pretty dang deep, trying to make the pass happen, and just didn't have the room to do it. Kugler in that black and red 57, and sure enough, just a little bit of nudge, and that is going to send Emerson around that Portland glass entry just like that. Fortunately, not looking like a lot of damage on Emerson's late model. He did bring it down to pit lane, but that might have just been a strategy call. I'm really not seeing any damage done to that 23, so he should be good to go and keep this thing going without a whole lot to worry about. Of course, this late model stock only came out to the iRacing.com platform about 2 weeks ago. Actually, about 3 weeks ago, now that I think about it. So, yeah, 3 weeks ago. Giving these drivers a little bit of time to get used to it. But of course, pretty much every single week since it's come out, it's gotten a little bit of tweaking done to it by the developers of the iRacing.com platform. So, we could see some of these incidents being a lot more significant than ones we saw in the past, because one of the most recent things that the iRacing team has worked on this late model stock is getting the damage model sorted out, making damage a little bit closer to real life, and that means making damage a little bit more impactful on these race cars. And that's the 57 of James Kugler, looking like he might have just gotten a black flag from race control, because he just went all the way back to the back of the field, was up inside the top 10, and now he's sitting back in 20th. Kenny Tripp still up in the front of this thing. Tyler Jalbert to his outside as well. So the front row still looking the same as it did. That temp setters number 12 and the tabletop trio 04 making up the front row of this event. Still a long way left to go though, only 15 laps in the books. Let's see what these drivers can make happen when we go green flag racing yet again. Everyone is rolling. And looking around the field, a little bit of trouble for Brandon Kaiga there. It looks like he might have had a little bit of a wiggle going into the corner. And that's Paul Hartwig Jr. up into the outside wall. He's losing spots real quick, and we are 3 wide racing here at the Langley Speedway. 3 wide, even if only for a moment. Definitely not what any of these drivers want to hear their spotters be calling out to them. That is a very dangerous situation to be in. And speaking of dangerous situations, there's John Friley having his nose pressed up against the rear of that 24. That's Corey Blevins. There are late models all around the speedway here trying to utilize every single line that they can get their hands on. Sean Patrick stuck up on the high side. He is falling back quite quickly as the freight train moves on past him. Only 1 spot down from where he qualified, and just like that, going to make it 2 spots. And then as that 57 of Kugler comes on into the picture, that's going to make it 3 spots just like that. Patrick not in a very good situation here, and kind of surprising to see how much trouble some of these drivers are having on the high line in this main event after the high line being so successful for some of the drivers. And that's Kugler around. Kugler around and down in pit lane. Looking at where that yellow pit cone is, I'm almost worried that Kugler might get hit with an unsafe pit entry there in that 57 machine. That, of course, would be something automated from the iRacing automated director. That's going to spin Kugler around. That's going to send him back to the back of the field again after climbing his way back a couple of positions. And that's going to bring out the second caution of the evening as Kugler tries to get himself back up where he needs to be in the running order. Let's take a look back here, see what brought out this second caution of the evening. The incident with Mr. James Kugler, and you can already see here at the beginning of the end for this disaster, we might actually have to break out the slow-mo camera for this one. Headed down to turns 3 and 4, a little bit of an accordion effect, and that's the 09 straight into his rear end just like that. That is TJ Moon, the Little Caesars entry. Hard into the back of James Kugler, and he just couldn't get that late model stock, and it's going to roll all the way down onto pit lane. So hopefully we can cross our fingers and pray that the iRacing gods are not going to slap Kugler with an unsafe pit entry there, but I can't make any definitive call on that one. Let's take another look back at this one. Back at full speed there, you can hear just how hard of an impact that was to the driver of the 57 machine. What a frustrating evening for this driver. 2 incidents now, both involved in both the cautions here this evening. And now, once again, he finds himself on this restart back in the 19th position. Back up at the front of this show, though, Kenny Tripp still in the front of this one. Shane Kohlmeyer, Chase Johnson, Tyler Jalbert, Dylan Hahn making up your top 5. Then it's going to be Brandon Kiger, Christian Tinkler, Mark Whitley, Mike Sukup, Scott Benedicts rounding out the rest of the top 10. 25 laps in the books, 200 laps left to go for these late model stock drivers. And sure enough, David Cannon and Stephen Rex both going to be getting waved around the pace car here. Stephen Rex still being scored a couple of laps down now, but it does look like that will put that number 10 driver now, I believe, 2 laps down instead of the 7 or so that he initially started with. So things looking pretty good for Mr. Stephen Rex. Not great. Still has to make a couple of more positions back, but things are looking better for him. And green flag up in the air, and we are having trouble on the restart. And yep, there are late models everywhere. And just like that, third caution of the evening. I think that one caught me off guard just as much as it did these late model stock drivers. I just looked down to see what the word was from race control on the 57 car to see if he got that penalty for unsafe pit entry or not, and sure enough, every car on the speedway was just head over heels. So we're gonna have to take a look back there and see what all happened to bring out that yellow, because that was instantaneous for these late model drivers, and it's looking like our truck is telling us it started somewhere around Sean Patrick. So let's see what all happens here. Going green flag racing, and it looks like the actual trouble started with maybe Corey Blevins, but there are drivers from all parts of the field involved in this one, but it looks like Corey Blevins might have been a little bit slow on that restart. So let's take another look back here, see if we can't better figure out what all went down here. We might actually have to break out the blimp camera for this one just to really figure out what all went down. We come up to the green, Corey Blevins in that 24. Oh no, the trouble happened all the way up at the front of the field, and there was just nothing anyone could do to get themselves stopped there. So we're going to have to take another look back at that. That started somewhere up in the front of the field. It looks like it might have been the 42 of Dylan Hahn that had trouble. Possibly? Let's take another look at that one. And no, the trouble was with Kenny Tripp not really getting rolling on that restart, but the rest of the field behind him all slammed on the gas, and it just caused a bit of an accordion effect, and there was nowhere a lot of these drivers could go. Paul Hartwig, Corey Blevins, the 09, that looks like TJ Moon, the 17 involved, Johnny B involved, 23 involved. That's Jonathan Emerson, Sean Patrick, James Kugler. we might have saw Mike Sukup in there as well. What a twist of fate for a whole lot of these late model drivers. We're seeing a couple of drivers all having to come down pit lane and get damage repaired there. And now looking at the front of this thing, Shane Kohlmeyer is being scored as our new race leader, Kenny Tripp, to his outside, which is not too surprising to see since Kenny Tripp had a little bit of trouble in that restart. Sean Patrick, or not Sean Patrick, where is he? That's Steven Rex. Steven Rex getting waved around once again, so he's going to be getting another lap back. And sure enough, Steven Rex is now only 1 lap down from our race leaders. He just needs one more caution to come out, and Steven Rex, who started this race off 7 laps down, will have the opportunity to get himself back up onto the lead lap of this one. That said, with all these yellows coming out and a little bit more pacing to do, how about we take a moment to give a shout out to our friends over at Harpoon Design. Lights out on the iRacing.com pace car. We're going to be trying this one again next time by. Shane Kohlmeyer and Kenny Tripp on the front of this one, and sure enough, we've gotten the word down from race control. Single file restarts until we can get this thing sorted out. So that is going to put some of these drivers in a very difficult position because now more or less everyone has to start on the outside line. And looking down the field, we have seen some drivers have a little bit of trouble with that. Green flag back up in the air, and sure enough, Shane Kohlmeyer off to an amazing start. Who knew not having to worry about another car beside you lets you get a really good jump when the green comes out, but sure enough, everything's looking good around the field. Mark Whitley way down low on the speedway trying to get around that 42 of Dylan Hahn, and he's going to make it work. Scott Benedict's loose going on to corner entry there. He had to check up just a little bit for that 42. Benedict's, he's up 8 positions right now. That Lucas Oil driver is having a really good evening this evening. Another driver up 8 positions, John Friley in the 126, started back in 18th, now up inside the top 10 and looking to try and get some more. And we do have a couple of words coming down from race control. First of all, the 38 got hit with an end-of-line penalty for incident responsibility. That looks like that is the 38 of Kristen Tinkler that got the end-of-line penalty for that initial restart issue, it looks like. And we also have word from race control that the lucky starting spot for tonight's race is position number 2, which would be Tyler Jalbert. So Jalbert, if he manages to take home the win here this evening, he will be looking at taking home a nice little $40 cash prize. Of course, gotta take home the win first. And he's got some very fast drivers in front of him he has to get around to make that happen. Things looking a little dicey up in the lead of this race, though. Side by side, touching doors for our race leaders. 42 laps in the books, and they are driving like there is less than 42 to go. Shane Kohlmeyer, he's going to have to fall back just a bit on that outside line. Chase Johnson sending it down deep, and Tyler Jalbert's going to capitalize on the 33 being stuck up there as well. So Jalbert, he's looking like he could be in a pretty good position to actually take home that cash bonus. No one has managed to do it since the bonus first began back on round number 8 of season 1, if I remember correctly. So, of course, if Jalbert doesn't manage to hit him the win, then the opportunity comes out again next week with $45 on the line for these late model drivers. And Kenny Tripp had a bit of trouble going into turns 1 and 2. He got way up high, and he's going to lose the position to Chase Johnson. So now Johnson, our race leader. And what an interesting battle for the lead we have. a driver with a win to his name who is second, or actually third in the championship standings going into tonight's event. But Johnson does have a win to his name. Kenny Tripp does not, but Tripp is our championship points leader coming into tonight's event. So, two drivers very close to each other, battling it out for the front of our championship, but with a little bit different stories to tell from each other. A little bit further back in the field, Jonathan Emerson's battling it out with Corey Blevins. These two drivers are not on the lead lap, but they are both duking it out for position here. And you gotta remember, there are 3 lucky dogs in the Pro American Late Model Series with every caution, not the typical one that we are used to seeing. So that means if a caution were to come out, both Blevins and Emerson would be given a lap back. So definitely something to keep in mind, that these two drivers, while they are battling for position, they are not battling for the lucky dog spot in particular. But hey, especially early on in this championship, every position that you can get counts here. And when it comes to round number 12 in a couple of months, the positions that they earn here today could end up being a deciding factor, and they just never really know. But speaking of the championship standings, we know Kenny Tripp is the championship leader, Chase Johnson back in third. But how about we talk a little bit about the driver who is second in the championship standings? That is the 77 Harpoon design entry of Mr. Mark Whitley. Had a little bit of trouble last week at Thompson, managed to bring it home in position number 5, but that's still looking very good for the Harpoon design driver. A first place finish and a 5th place finish, going to put him 2nd place in the championship standings, and he is only 2 points behind Kenny Tripp coming into tonight's event. So right now, running back in 5th, looking to try and take home another top 5. I'll tell you what, that would do wonders in the championship standings for him, but he still has to worry about Kenny Tripp, the driver in the front of this race, who is presently the championship leader. And I think that because he won his heat race, that if the race ended right now with Chase Johnson in front of him, Tripp would still be holding on to that championship lead with a 2nd place finish. Just behind him, though, Tyler Jalbert. Jalbert is being scored back into the 8th position in the championship standings. So that tabletop trio entry, he is looking mighty good here tonight in a 3rd place finish. Or really any finish in the top 5, that would be good enough to bump him up a couple of spots. And just behind him, that is Shane Kohlmeyer in 4th, who is just behind him in the championship standings. So a lot of stories breaking out all around the field. We're not even close to the end of this thing, and we've still got a lot of season left of us. But Tyler Jalbert, he's gotten around Kenny Tripp. Jalbert is pushing. Jalbert could very well be the first driver to take home the lucky starting spot bonus here tonight. Of course, that is a very, very big what if. There's still a long way left to go in this one, but he could just make it happen in that 04 tabletop trio entry. A little bit further back in the field, that's Mike Sukup in the 45, going way down low to get around that Lucas Oil 88 of Scott Benedict. And with Benedict stuck up there, Salamone going to send it down there as well. In the Hot Wheels entry, he's going to get the pass made without too much difficulty. Only 62 laps in the books, though. We've still got a lot of racing left to go. We do have a couple of pit cycles to have to worry about. These drivers do not have fuel to make it to the end, even if they went just full save mode. These drivers would not have enough fuel to make it to the end. So definitely at least one pit stop is on the menu this evening, potentially 2, and maybe even 3, depending on how some of these drivers' strategies might play out. We do have a driver that has made 3 pit stops already. That's Jonathan Emerson in that number 23 Portland Glass entry. But to be fair, a lot of those pit stops for Emerson were because of involvement in incidents, and you can see even with those stops, still a pretty hefty amount of damage on that late model stock car. Emerson currently running back in 16th. He is the first driver no longer on the lead lap. So if a caution were to come out, it would be Emerson, Levens, and Hartwig getting a lap back, and that would put all three of them back on the lead lap. Excuse me, it would be Cannon, Emerson, and Blevins. Hartwig would not get the lucky dog if a caution came out. 67 laps in the books, though. And up in the front, Mark Whitley is putting the pressure down on Shane Kohlmeyer. Kohlmeyer in that 33 Haas entry. He's up a couple of positions. Not as many as Whitley's, though. Whitley has gained 7 spots in tonight's event. He is loose off the corner. Whitley, big wiggle coming out of turn number 4. He's still got it pointed in the right direction, though. Had to take a little bit of an alternate line than maybe he was used to running to get around that number 19 of David Cannon, who is currently being scored a lap down. So lap traffic is playing a factor into tonight's event already. And looking like a little bit further back in the field, TJ Moon's got himself into a little bit of a scuffle as well. That's John Friley just in front of him, battling it out for 12th and 13th. TJ Moon in that little Caesars entry. He is being scored back into the 24th position in the championship standings. So all these spots really matter for TJ Moon, and he is trying to muscle his way around that 126, and he's going to make it happen. He is going to make it happen without too much difficulty. A little bit of connection issues for that 09 machine, so Friley might have seen that car blink out just beside him and decide, you know what, I don't feel like dealing like that today. Because after all, only 74 laps in the books. We still have over 100 left to go. Right now, the name of the game probably should be preservation of your car first and foremost, and leave all that battling stuff for later on in the race. But sure enough, drivers battling it out up here, and that is the number 10 of Steven Rex, who is being scored a lap down up in front of these 4 cars all battling for position. Rex going to pull it up high. That's going to bunch the field up just a little bit. Emerson in that 23 also being scored a lap down. But they've all got it navigated through there pretty cleanly. Everyone's looking all fine and dandy there. Everything nice and sorted out for the drivers battling just outside of the top 10. Brandon Kiger getting pressure from behind. That's the 42 of Dylan Hahn, a driver that I feel like we've both talked about a lot, and at the same time, not at all. Hahn, a rookie driver here to the Pro American Late Model Series in that unsponsored 42 machine, did really well in his heat races. Down 4 positions from where he qualified though, so not having the evening he'd quite like to have here this evening, but he is closing the gap on that 85 machine. That's the 65 up there on the high line. That is the 65 of Wesley Ray Jr. in that Mobil 1 entry. He's being scored a lap down. But this lap traffic is allowing these drivers to start to maybe make some moves that they wouldn't be able to otherwise. Hahn has completely closed the gap on Kiger. Tried to think about peaking it down low there just a little bit in turns 3 and 4, but he backed out of it. He was not feeling comfortable with that. 82 laps in the books. As we get closer and closer to lap number 100, I would imagine drivers are starting to think a little bit more about their pit strategies. They do have to come in at some point after all. And once we get close to lap 100, that should be when we start getting close to being out of fuel. And it looks like Chase Johnson had a little bit of trouble. Sure enough, Chase Johnson got a little bit of a bump from Tyler Jalbert. And now, I believe for the first time in Pro American Late Model Series history, the driver who is looking to get the lucky starting spot bonus is in the lead of the race. Tyler Jalbert in that 04, only up one position. He did start on the outside line of this spot, or of this race, but that tabletop trio driver is looking to try and get his first win of the season. He's back in the 8th position in the championship standings, so getting a win would do wonders for him. And of course, getting things looking real good for you in the championship standings early on in the season is only going to do yourself favors in the future. But now, Jalbert has to lead this thing for another about 140 or so laps. That's not going to be easy. We've seen how Langley Speedway goes. This is the track that just has a little bit of a chaos factor to it. After all, we are quite literally across the street from a NASA research facility. You know why NASA built that research facility there? Well, race fans, I can't truthfully answer that question, but I reckon it's probably to research the physics of sending late model stock cars into orbit. Race leader coming up on some serious lap traffic there. He's going to have some trouble getting around this. There's the 19. That is David Cannon. Then he's going to have to get around Steven Rex. And that's Corey Blevins up there in the 24 as well. And sure enough, our race leader is going to be coming down to pit lane just like that. Talbert and Johnson both making the call to come down to pit lane. That might have been a little bit of a scary situation for some of those lap cars. And of course, these drivers do have the ability to communicate with each other. That is not picked up here in our broadcast booth, so it's entirely possible that they announced to everyone that, hey, we're coming down pit lane. But from up here in the broadcast booth, that completely caught me off guard, and so if any of these late model drivers weren't paying attention, that would have caught them off guard very heavily as well. Looks like Christian Tinkler is going to be coming down pit lane as well. Now with the pit cycle beginning to come through, TJ Moon coming in as well. That's going to put Kenny Tripp back up in the lead of this thing. And once again, we have our race leader coming across a bit of lap traffic here this evening. That's once again the 10 of Mr. Steven Rex. But Kenny Tripp's going to come down. He doesn't have to worry about that lap traffic anymore either. Now Dylan Hahn's going to be scored as our race leader, as he is the next driver to still need to come down. Brandon Kiger and Mike Sukup both also have not come down as well. They both still have a bit of a ways to go. And Brandon Kiger, he's going to be making the call to come in. And it looks like that 88, Scott Benedict's also making his way down. Benedict's going to be taking tires. And that is going to leave him with a... Oh, Benedict's is going for 4 tires. Now that is actually a very interesting strategy call. I figured it would be 2 tires all the way around, but sure enough, Scott Benedict's is going to be taking 4 here this evening. That's going to leave him with almost a 30-second pit stop, though. That is going to be not doing him any favors. Benedict's is still down on pit lane, and his car is rolling in the wrong direction. Benedict's might be having some trouble down there. I'm not quite sure what all they have going on with that 88, but he has it parked down there for way longer than any scheduled pit stops would be. But looking around the field, it does look like there is some interesting calls. For most people, it's looking like the call is 2 tires, but most peculiar to me, Paul Hartwig in that 34 Exalta entry, it looks like the call for him was fuel only, no tires on that 34 machine. He is still running the ones that he had on 100 laps ago. Dylan Hahn going to be the next driver to make his way on down to pit lane, and it looks like he is the last driver to have to cycle through on this pit cycle. So when things come back through, Tyler Jalbert going to be put back into the lead of this one, and Chase Johnson is right behind him in that 83. Once again, they battled for the lead before the yellow came out, and they battled for the lead again right after. Jaubert's got a lot of pressure on him. That gap is closing between himself and Johnson. And once again, they have lap traffic in front of them that they have to contend with here. Let's take a moment, ride on board with this driver, see what all he is seeing out here on the speedway course. For the most part, not entirely what this driver is seeing as this camera is mounted on the nose of his car. That's Johnny B going way up high to get out of his way, and now he has that 10 of Steven Rex to get around. Another lap car. I'm not quite sure who that is further up the field. That might be Scott Benedict's. But Tyler Jaubert, currently your race leader. He's made it past the 100 lap mark. That alone is a little bit of a milestone, but still no ability for him to rest easily quite yet, because he has to worry about the rest of the cars all around the field, and you never know what might just happen in these next 120 laps. Mark Whitley duking it out with Kenny Tripp. Looks like he just lost that position to the number 12 driver, and now Tripp is putting the pressure down on Shane Kohlmeyer. He's going to try and just muscle his way back into the top 3. He started out in the front of this one. He is the championship points leader. He wants to get a race win to his name as well. That Haas entry not going to make it easy for him. At a narrow track like this, dare I say patience is key. But we've seen with these late model drivers, they are not afraid to throw a little bit of punches when they deem it necessary. Mark Whitley's back up in this one as well. Whitley back to being involved in this battle. It fell back just a little bit, but now they're all nose to tail. This is the battle for the 3rd position. Kenny Tripp's going to send it in way down low. He's going to give Kohlmeyer a bit of the tap, and now they're pulled alongside with each other. He's going to make it happen. They're still touching doors coming out of turn number 4. Kohlmeyer almost up into the outside wall there, and they're going to make contact. Just like that, yellow flag number 4 here this evening, and drivers are just piling into that incident, huh? That is a driver on his lid. That's Corey Blevins upside down. That might just be our first rollover of the season, race fans. And unfortunately, Corey Blevins is the lucky driver that gets to wear that badge. That said, let's take a look back and see what all brought out that yellow, because that was quite the bit of an incident there. Side by side for Kenny Tripp and that 33, that Haas entry. And just a little bit of bumper cars happened. Everyone going around. And I think we got to take a moment to really appreciate what all just went down with Corey Blevins there, mostly. As our first rollover of the season, if I am not mistaken. Gotta give the Hasib design number 24 a little bit of spotlight for ending up on his lid. Because that is not going to be making the rest of this race go much better for him. And just a little bit of contact from behind with Scott Benedict's, and that was enough to send him up and over. That was a little bit of a weird bounce there, but sure enough, that 24 is going to end up on the wrecker. He's not retired from the race, though, but not quite what all he wanted to see. Well, let's take one last look at this incident that brought out the yellow, the contact between Tripp and Kohlmeyer. Just a bit of a nudge was all it took, and then everyone else tried to lock it down. And it just did not quite work out for Corey Blevins. He got the short end of the stick there. And now Blevins being scored back into the 21st position as they get him on that tow truck. And we'll have to see if he ends up bringing it racing again. I would love to see that driver get back out on the speedway, but after an incident like that, I don't know if the chances are looking really good, but we are getting some wave rounds. The 38, the 17, and the 10 are all lucky dogs. So that would be Christian Tinkler, Steven Rex, and Sean Patrick, all going to be getting a lap back here this evening. Lights out on the iRacing.com pace car. We've already got things stacked back up once again, and the lights are back on. Racing Control said, nuh-uh, we're not ready to go yet. We've got to get these lucky dogs sorted out. So we will be going another time around the speedway here. Caution number 4 out on the raceway, though. What an evening it has been. About halfway through the race now. We'll just have to see what these drivers can do when they go green flag racing again. Tyler Jalbert, Mark Whitley, the Harpoon design driver, currently the biggest mover of the evening, up 10 positions from where he qualified in that 77 machine. So we will be going green flag racing this time by iRacing.com pace car going to be heading on down into pit lane as we come through turn number 4. Tyler Jalbert, Mark Whitley, Dylan Hahn, Paul Hartwig Jr., your top 4 drivers with very different stories coming into this race. 4 drivers with very different pit strategies, and already that's contact between Hahn and Whitley. No harm done, but Whitley's stuck up on the high side. That is a difficult place to be. But it does look like he's making it work in that number 77 machine. He does have it pointed in the right direction. Side by side, just a little bit further behind them, that's Kohlmeyer down on the low line and Brandon Kiger up on the high side. Kiger tries to do the crossover. Not quite going to work. Chase Johnson busts behind them as well. There was a point in this race where we saw Chase Johnson up in the front of it. But the same can be said with Kenny Tripp. Kenny Tripp started out on the pole this one, and now he's all the way back in the 9th position. So things have definitely been shaken up this evening, and I'm sure there will be much more shaking left to go as we sort ourselves through these remaining 103 laps around the Langley Speedway. And we are about to go 3 wide, aren't we? For just a brief moment there, we were 3 wide coming out of turn number 2. A very, very treacherous place to be, but everyone managed to get through that situation pretty comfortably. There's a little bit of pumper cars going back further back in the back. That's John Friley in the 126, who is being scored a couple of laps down, 5 laps down as a matter of fact. He's going to get up high to get Scott Benedict's around him. Benedict's in that number 88, also being scored laps down. Actually, everyone behind Christian Tinkler in 11th is a lap down or more. So 11 cars still on the lead lap. Of course, if we get any more yellows, Lucky Dogs going to be putting more drivers back up on that lead lap. But for the time being, these are the 11 drivers all duking it out for the win for the time being. But as we cross the line onto lap 126, Tyler Jalbert still up in the front of this thing, and now less than 100 laps to get through tonight's event. Jalbert, Hahn, and Whitley making up your top 3. Paul Hartwig Jr., he's pretty much involved in this one as well. He's fallen back a little bit on corner exit, but he makes all that ground back up on corner entry without too much issue. So right now, it's looking like drivers have things a little bit under control. And I say that Mark Whitley getting really loose out of turns number 4, but they've all still got it rolling. So how about we take a moment to turn things up and let y'all appreciate the sound of these brand new late model stock cars as they roll out around the Langley Speedway. Race fans, it's time to bring noise, presented by our friends over at Harpoon Design. And just like that, caution flag back out on the speedway for the 5th time here this evening. And it's looking like the difficulty might be for that 10 machine of Mr. Steven Rex. That's the only word we're getting from our folks down at the truck. Let's see if we can't take a look back and see what brought out this 5th caution here this evening. Of course, got to give a big thanks to our friends over at Harpoon Design for providing our Bring the Noise segment. And of course, got to thank Mr. Mike Sukup and Tyler Jalbert for the onboard footage during that moment. Let's take a moment to look back and see what all happened to that number 10 of Steven Rex, because he's currently being scored a couple of laps down when that yellow came out. Side by side with TJ Moon heading down into turns 3 and 4. And they just hook bumpers, and oh, that's a hard impact for Steven Rex. He's not going to pull it into pit lane, though, which is a surprise, because that is a massive impact for that number 10 machine. Surely I thought that would put some heavier damage on it than it did, because that was quite the hit, but going down to turns 3 and 4, just a little bit of contact gets those two late models stuck together, and once that happened, there was no stopping that. There was nothing either of them really could have done to get themselves unhooked from the situation they were in there. Quite the impact for that drop in bombs racing driver. Let's take one more look back at this thing, take a look on board, and see how much of an impact he felt during that incident, because that must have been a pretty massive impact for this driver. He tries his best to get it turned, but just nothing he could do with how they were stuck together like that. So that is going to bring out the 5th caution of the evening here. A couple more drivers electing to come down pit lane. Sean Patrick down, Steven Rex down. Looks like Holmeyer might have also come down there. Johnson, Whitley, and Salomon all come down under this yellow. Of course, more lucky dogs up for grabs. Sean Patrick going to get the wave around. Scott Benedict's around as well, and Jonathan Emerson. So those 3 drivers all going to be getting a lap back. That'll put Sean Patrick back on the lead lap, but Jonathan Emerson and Scott Benedict's both currently being scored a couple of laps down, so they're going to need a little bit more yellow to come back out on the speedway. But hey, race fans, do you need a paint? Then look no further than Harpoon Design. They design and deliver one-off replications of your favorite NASCAR schemes or completely custom schemes based on your ideas or sponsors. Ready to get started with them? Just head on over to harpoondesign.com. That said, though, race fans, we are going to be going green flag racing, this time by Dylan Hahn, Brandon Kiger, your front 2 drivers. Once again, we have shaken up the front of this field. Green flag up in the air. We're going to try this thing again. Side by side, further back in the back, but Dylan Hahn and Brandon Kiger are going to single file it out just a little bit, and that's trouble for Kristen Tinkler. Tinkler stuck up on the highlight a bit, and they're going to make contact with that's with Jalbert. Jalbert and Tinkler stuck together just a little bit. That's the 34. Paul Hartwig Jr. also getting up into this battle. He's going to fall back a little bit. He saw what was going on there, and he said, "Nuh-uh, no, I do not want any of what's going on there." And they're making contact again. That's again Christian Tinkler having a bit of trouble. Tinkler was locking it up with Jalbert, but he managed to get the cars unstuck, and we might have trouble for Whitley. Whitley's around. Tyler Whitley around down on the grass. That's going to send him all the way back down to 12th. He's trying to get it around. He's trying to get it rolling again before our leaders catch up to him. He's got it rolling, but will it be enough? No. Whitley's going to go a lap down just like that. Yellow flag not going to come out for that incident as it was off the racing service, but that is a rough situation for Mark Whitley, who was running up inside the top 5 there. Real quick, let's take a quick look back and see what happened to the driver of that Harpoon design entry. And a little bit of a nudge with the 33. That was with Shane Kohlmeyer, a driver that has had made contact with Whitley as well. These two drivers have had a little bit of a history. Played nice with each other back at Thompson, but had a little bit of incidents with each other back at Martinsville. So definitely a very unfortunate situation for the driver of that 77 machine. That's going to move him all the way back down to the 12th position. And he is going to be scored one lap down. Fortunately for him, there are no other drivers only one lap down. Just behind him is Benedict, who is 3 laps down. So as long as Whitley does not get involved in any more incidents, he doesn't have anything to worry about in regards to getting back up into the front of this race, because that basically guarantees himself a lucky dog position should the caution come back out. And if nothing else, it means he doesn't have to worry about losing any more position to lap cars. Again, all of that is provided that he doesn't get involved in another incident. If he gets involved in another incident, then there's no telling what might happen to the driver of that 77 machine. But right now, not a great situation for him to be in, but it's not quite the end of the world. Currently, though, we're looking up at the battle for the 7th position. Chase Johnson up in the front of this one. Just behind him, that's Shane Kohlmeyer, the driver that we have just been talking about. All of them setting some pretty fast lap times. Actually, they're all setting lap times comparable to that of our race leader of Dylan Hahn. Last time by, Chase Johnson actually set a faster lap time than Dylan Hahn did up there in the front of this race. And again, that still rings true. Both Chase Johnson and it looks like Shane Kohlmeyer both set faster lap times than Dylan Hahn last time by. So Hahn, he has a bit of a gap right now. He's a little bit by himself in that 42 at the time being. But it looks like he might be slowing down. The drivers behind him are gaining on him in terms of lap time, even if Kiger is falling back. We'll just have to see, will Hahn be able to hold up to the front of this thing? Coming into tonight's event, Hahn is not even actually on the standings. This is Hahn's first race here with us. And the caution flag is going to come out again, so that might just make his attempt to hold on to the lead a little bit more difficult. And dare I say the caution's out for Mark Whitley. Well, race fans, this is what happens when I start talking about a driver. You know, all of that things I said about how everything is bright and sunny for Mark Whitley as long as he doesn't get in another incident. Unfortunately, it's looking like I got him in another incident. Let's take a look back and see what brought out this 6th caution here this evening. Once again, we find ourselves looking down at the driver of the 77. That's Mark Whitley in the Harpoon design entry. And it looks like that's Chase Johnson just behind him, and they make contact. Whitley tries to get it rolling again, and that's the 09 that plowed right into the back of him. That was TJ Moon that sent Whitley upside down. So now 2 drivers up on their lid here at the Langley Speedway here tonight. 2 rollovers just like that. What an evening of heartbreak it has been for some of these late model stock drivers. There's a little bit of contact with Chase Johnson there. He tries to get it rolling again. A little bit of contact with John Friley. And there's the 09 at TJ Moon. And there's drivers all over the speedway trying to avoid that incident. That's the 17 way down there on the grass trying to get around it. That was Sean Patrick. Let's take a look back right on board with TJ Moon here going into that incident. See what he saw. That ended up inevitably sending that 77 machine upside down and on the tow truck. For what worth, he did try to get it stopped, but he did not get on the brakes fast enough to stop that incident from happening. And I don't know if it was really possible for him to be able to. But that's going to bring out caution number 6 of the evening. The 77, the 88, and the 23. We'll be getting wave arounds this time by there. The lucky dogs, that'll be Scott Benedicts, who is currently down on pit lane. The 77 of Mark Whitley, who was involved in the incident, and the 23 of Jonathan Emerson will all be getting a lap back here. But while we are still under this yellow, let's take a moment to give a shout out to our friends over at Harpoon Design. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the Langley Speedway. 163 laps in the books. And once again, we have a front row of drivers that I don't think was necessarily in anyone's bingo cards here. This is Paul Hartwig Jr. and Mike Sukup making up the front row of this race. Neither of them came down to pit lane under this yellow. It's looking like almost every single other car on the lead lap did. The only exception to that, besides these two drivers we have up in the front, Paul Hartwig and Mike Sukup, who pitted on lap 137, the only other driver on the lead lap that did not pit under this yellow is Sean Patrick, who also pit on lap 137. So, a bit of a varying pit strategy up here, but it looks like most of the mid-pack has the same idea. But as we go green flag racing this time by, that raises the very, very big question here of, will the old tires cause that much of a problem for these two front row drivers? We're also getting word down from race control that Chase Johnson got an EOL for incident responsibility with that incident that put Mark Whitley upside down. So that will send Johnson back to the 11th position as the last car on the lead lap. And the lights are back on the iRacing.com pace car, as it looks like there was an issue that didn't get Benedict's the lucky dog position he was supposed to have, but he's got it around the speedway now. And this time by, we should be going green again here. Mike Sukup and Paul Hartwig, your two front runners. And it looks like Hartwig might be having a little bit of connection issues there. But we're going to get this one rolling again. We're going to see what happens. What can these drivers do on this restart? Green flag up in the air. We are rolling. And Paul Hartwig Jr. is off to a pretty massive lead just like that. It looks like his tire situation is nothing to worry about. Mike Sukup, on the other hand, he is falling back quite quickly here. Just like that, Sukup already down 4 positions on that restart, and if he can't get himself down low right here, right now, he's set up to lose even more. He's going to get down there. He's going to stop Dylan Hahn from capitalizing on that little bit of difficulty on the restart. And there's Will Salomon, another driver stuck up on the high line, a driver we've not talked much about this evening. That number 36 Hot Wheels entry, up 4 positions from where he qualified. Salomon, coming into tonight's event, is in the 9th position. And of course, Salomon was a driver we saw compete full time in season number 1. Great to see him back out here again for season number 2. We're going to see if he can't bring home a top 5 here this evening in that Hot Wheels entry. The battle up for the front is heating up, though. Hartwig and Jalbert duking it out. Jalbert nearly had the pass made down there. And he does have one thing going for him here, and that is that the 34 has a tiny little bit of right front damage. That might come to bite him in the butt later in this race. But Jalbert, he is really, really pushing to get around that number 34 driver and take home that $40 cash bonus if he's able to make it happen. He just has to get one more spot, and we could see the first ever driver take home the lucky starting spot finish bonus here this evening. But with 50 laps left to go, he's going to give the nudge to Hartwig, and he's going to spin Hartwig around. Hartwig's still going, a little bit of checkup behind him. And there's another car around. That's going to bring out the caution. I think that was Dylan Hahn around. Sure enough, Dylan Hahn around on the speedway. That's going to bring out caution number 7. And dare I say, that might just end up as an EOL for Tyler Jalbert. And just after I got through hyping it up for potentially taking home the lucky starting spot bonus, he might just get hit with an end-of-line penalty here for incident responsibility. I'm not gonna say that definitively until I hear from race control, but that might be a little bit of an oopsie on Tyler Jalbert's part. But for now, let's take a look back, see what all happened to bring out that yellow. We saw what happened up in the front of this race, but let's see what happened back to Dylan Hahn, who was back still inside the top 5, battling it out with Mike Sukup, and checked up a bit for the incident and just got a massive hit from the rear by Christian Tinkler. Let's ride on board up with that 34 driver, Paul Hartwig, get a look through the rear of what he saw going on back there. Well, right now, he sees a whole lot of Tyler Jalbert's bumper. Tyler Jalbert was there for pretty much the entire backstretch, and just a little bit of a nudge sends him around, and then a little bit of chaos breaks out just behind him. So just like that, caution number 7 up on the speedway here this evening. And you know what they say, I mean, it's Langley Speedway. This is the track that brings on chaos no matter what division of racing you bring here. And if nothing else, with those 2 different late models that have ended up upside down in these past couple of yellows, I think we're giving the folks at the Langley NASA Research Center a lot of valuable data here. That might just be me, but I think that they're having a good time at this race, getting some very valuable aeronautic data on what happens when you send a late model stock up into the air. Of course, with this yellow coming out, more drivers going to get the wave arounds. The 23 of Jonathan Emerson going to get sent around again. Same with Scott Benedict's also going to be getting the lucky dog a second time in a row. Mark Whitley going to be our 3rd lucky dog driver here this evening. Emerson and Benedict still being scored a lap down. Whitley being scored, looks like 3 laps down here. So Whitley might have had a little bit more trouble at some point in this last little stint of the race. But the lights are off on the racing.com pace car, so everyone's in the right position. So that means, yeah, Emerson, Benedict, Whitley still all being scored at least a lap down, if not more. But we're going to try this thing again. Green flag is going back up in the air, race fans. Tyler Jalbert, Brandon Kiger, the front row of this race. And it does look like Jalbert did not get an EOL under that yellow. So Jalbert is still our race leader. Jalbert still has the potential to make something happen here. Green flag back up in the air. Currently the closest battle on Speedway side by side for Mike Sukup and Will Salamone. 2 drivers that we see duking it out fairly common here in P.A.L.M.S, both in Season 1 and Season number 2. And everyone needs to be heads up as that 38's coming out of pit lane. That is the 38 of Christian Tinkler coming back out on Speedway. Looks like he might have had to get a little bit of a damage fix. Last time by, though, Tyler Jalbert just set a new personal fastest lap, and looks like a new fastest lap of the race. A 15.4. So Tyler Jalbert, he has some speed in that 04 tabletop trio late model still. Will he be able to put it to good use in these final couple of laps, though? Don't want to burn your things up too quickly and not have anything left to go in maybe about the final 20 laps or so, especially if we end up having more cautions come out on the speedway. That could make things very difficult for our race leader. But right now, things are looking really good for him. He is setting down some incredibly fast lap times, faster than everyone else on the field last time by, except Kenny Tripp. Kenny Tripp still also has a whole lot of speed under the hood of that number 12 machine, and needless to say, it's not a surprise that he is the championship leader coming into tonight's event. He has a very fast hot rod. That number 12 temp setter's entry. Currently, he is running back in the 4th position, naturally 3 spots down from where he qualified, as he was the pole sitter here this evening. And last time by, again, setting a very fast lap time, but it was actually a 1,000th of a second slower than that of Brandon Kiger. So very equally matched for all of our drivers up here in the front of the field here this evening. 190 laps in the books though. Call it about 35 left to go. Let's take a quick look at the top-down view of things here. Get a look at just how little room these drivers have to work with here at the Langley Speedway, and B, get a little bit better idea of where everyone is around the speedway. Call it about 0.4 of a second between our race leader of Tyler Jalbert and Mr. Paul Hartwig, and that's roughly 2 car lengths of space, and another bit of a gap between Hartwig and Kiger, about, again, 0.4 of a second. So that puts in perspective just how much room is actually separating these drivers visually compared to the actual times that they have separating them on our scoring tower here. A little bit further back, Dylan Hahn is getting back up involved in this race. He's currently being stored back in the 6th position, trying to put the hammer down on Mr. Chase Johnston and get himself back up inside of the top 5. Hahn started all the way up on the podium, back in the 3rd position, as again, a rookie driver here with the lead. So even a top 5 finish would be incredibly good for him. But he, right now, he wants to get back up on that podium. I mean, he has to start it by getting around Chase Johnson. Closest battle on the speedway right here is between Johnson and Hassan, though. Not even 0.2 of a second separating these 2 late model drivers. They are effectively nose to tail here. And Johnson, he is just not able to make any ground up on Hahn here. But as they battle it out, that is allowing Sukup to slowly but surely make some ground back up. But it's not going to matter. The caution flag back out on the speedway, and it's sounding like the trouble is for Shane Kohlmeyer. And Kohlmeyer's rolling right there, so we're also hearing Sean Patrick, who is also rolling. Wesley Everett Jr. also rolling. And there's the driver in question that we saw turn around the front stretch. That is Scott Benedicts. So that's going to be caution number 8, and it looks like whatever it was, Scott Benedicts has ended up pointing in the wrong direction. So how about we take a look back and see what all just went down there for the driver of that number 88 Lucas Oil entry. That is the 33 of Kohlmeyer way down low, and just that nudge was enough to get him upset, and then the accordion effect down the front stretch. Exactly the way that you would expect it to be in a racing textbook. Everything that could go wrong there just kind of happened to went wrong. So I started with Scott Benedicts in that 33 Kohlmeyer. Just a little bit of nudge got them both loose, and then Kohlmeyer got sent around by Whitley, and then it looks like that was also Sean Patrick involved. What a wild ride for these late model stock car drivers. Quite the incident going on there. Let's see if we can't get an onboard view. Maybe let's take a look back at, I think Salomon might have gotten a pretty decent view of what all went down there. And it looks like we're not on the right lap here, so that would help. Let's see if we can't get a better look back at this. Just a little bit of a classic accordion effect going on, and no one could really get those late models stopped in time. So just like that, that is going to be caution number 8 out on the speedway. Wave arounds happening right about now as we have 24 laps left to go. And it's looking like the wave around is going to go to the 38 of Christian Tinkler, the 23 of Jonathan Emerson, and the 77 of Mark Whitley. So that's going to give... No, that's the 38 of Christian Tinkler. Yeah, that one's right. And it's the 23 of Emerson and the 88 of Scott Benedicts, not the 77 of Mark Whitley. And we are also getting word that Shane Kohlmeyer is getting an EOL penalty for incident responsibility, so that is going to send Kohlmeyer back to the back of the field. Let's try this one again, though. 23 laps left to go. Green flag up in the air. Going to be 22 across the line. And once again, Tyler Jalbert, Paul Hartwig Jr., the front row of this race. Kenny Tripp, Jace Johnson just behind them. And these drivers are not going to be throwing any punches in these final 22 laps. This is for all the marbles here, race fans. And still side by side for our race leaders. Hartwig up into the wall just a little bit. Kenny Tripp and Chase Johnson, a little bit of contact and more contact there. And oh no! Oh no! Well, let's give it up for car number 3 upside down here this evening. And a whole lot more broken hearts here tonight. Race fans, I think I can officially say we will not be handing out the lucky starting spot bonus here this evening. So it'll be going up to $45 for our next race at USA International Speedway. But for right now, we need to take a moment to stop and break down what all just went down there. Started out up in the front between our race leaders Paul Hartwig and Tyler Jalbert. Kenny Tripp there as well. A little bit of nudge from Tripp to Hartwig, and it all just fell apart from there, race fans. What an incident. Let's take a ride back on board with the 23, who was, for the most part, able to avoid everything that just went down. He was pretty much just an innocent bystander here, and he might be celebrating internally a little bit as pretty much the entire field in front of him just collapsed. Looking a little bit like LA traffic on the front stretch here at the Langley Speedway. We might need to break out the blimp camera again just to try and properly digest everything that happened there, because what an incident that was. We'll even break out the slow-mo camera for this one. This one is worthy enough to really soak in the details of it. All started with a little bit of nudge between Chase Johnson, Kenny Tripp, that nudged him into the 34 Paul Hartwig, and that got him up into the Tabletop Trio 04, and then everyone else just comes piling in. At this rate, even if you fully slammed on the brakes, you're just not quite going to be able to get that late model stopped, and if you do, it's going to end up sending you around like you saw down there. That's Christian Tinkler, who got almost 90 degrees sideways from getting on the brakes so hard there. So that's going to be caution flag number 9 here on the speedway. More wave rounds going to be dished out. Looking like the 88 of Scott Bendix, the 77 of Mark Whitley, and the 65 of Leslie Ray Jr. are going to be our lucky dogs this time by, so that will bump some of them back up on the lead lap. Actually, no, it's looking like because of that incident, everyone involved still is being at least a lap down, if not more. And also the 12 car, that's Kenny Tripp, actually is going to be hit with incident responsibility for this one. So that's going to be an EOL for Kenny Tripp, who is being scored 2 laps down now anyways, so not too big of a deal for Kenny Tripp. But I'll tell you what, just like that, we have completely shaken the field up once again here, race fans. Dylan Hahn, Brandon Kiger now going to be your front row with Shane Kohlmeyer and Christian Tinkler back in 3rd and 4th. We're going to try this one again. 14 laps left to go here at the Langley Speedway, and we are rolling. Hahn off to a pretty good start. The inside line generally seems to be getting the better jumps on these restarts. It's looking like the cooler temperatures might be making the outside line just a little bit trickier. Back during the daylight, during these heat races, we saw the outside line have some success on these restarts, but right now, the inside line looks like it is the place to be here this evening. Currently looking at the battle for position number 3, Brandon Kiger and Kohlmeyer and Kiger actually battling it out here for 2nd. About 0.3 of a second dividing these two late model stock car drivers. Is double high five up in the air. 10 laps left to go around this a little bit over 1/3 of a mile speedway. And these two drivers, they're ready to do everything that's necessary to take home the win. But Dylan Hahn just has to hold on for 9 more laps, and he would be a rookie driver taking home the checkered flag. But these probably are going to be the next 8 most stressful laps of his career here in the Pro American Late Model Series. Trying to take home the win in his first ever start, not only of the season, but his first ever start with the league, period. That's Kenny Tripp up in the 12 there. He's going to go way up high for our race leaders as he currently is being scored a lap down. Now, once again, the closest battle on the speedway still is that battle for 2nd between Shane Kohlmeyer and Brandon Kiger. 6 laps left to go here at Langley to settle the score. Emerson fell back in position. Salamone's now up in 4th as Emerson had a little bit of trouble. Looks like there is some damage on that number 23 machine. He just might not be able to keep the pace up with the damage on there like it is, but big high five up in the air. 5 laps left to go. Dylan Hahn, he's building up more of a lead as these two battle it out for 2nd. Shane Kohlmeyer looking to try and take home a podium finish. 4 laps left to go. Brandon Kiger, he's right there as well. And Badex is getting involved in a battle as well. Never mind, no, he's not. Jonathan Emerson, who is on the lead lap, is going to be pulling that late model on down to pit lane with 3 laps left to go. That might just be the evening for Emerson. Sure enough, he has parked it completely. He's not just taking a splash of fuel and get back out there. That is Emerson calling it quits for the evening. But Dylan Hahn, he's got his gap up to over a second now as he comes out of turn 4 and takes the white flag. Brandon Kiger, Shane Kohlmeyer duking it out for 2nd. White flag up in the air. And as we cross the line, come out of turn 3 and 4, it's going to be Dylan Hahn taking home the win. Shane Kohlmeyer and Brandon Kiger rounding out your top 3, but a rookie driver here taking home the checkered flag here at Langley Speedway after quite the chaotic race. I'll tell you what, race fans, I don't think anyone had this race's outcome on their bingo cards here tonight. We saw pretty much every driver in the field up at the front at some point or another. But Dylan Hahn's going to be the driver that manages to make it happen here this evening. Hahn trying to get things sorted out for a little bit of a burnout here, and now he's going to pull it on down to victory lane. Don't go anywhere, race fans. We will be back in just a moment with some interviews with your top 3 finishers here this evening. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to Langley Speedway and welcome back to the Pro American Late Model Series. Oh, that's not good. Well, I pulled him up into the broadcast booth to get an interview with him, and he left right when I did it. All right, let me try it again. Hey there, Dylan, you got a coffee?
Yep, I'm here.
Alrighty, well, congratulations on the race win. Before I even kick into the interview, that might have been what you just got told by Steven and Matt, but the news is that this was one of the surprise payout races by our friends over at Harpoon Design. So, congratulations on the win and congratulations on taking home a nice little $15 bonus for your efforts here tonight. What a race it's
Yeah,
been, though. How are you feeling now that everything's said and done tonight?
yeah, I was just buying my time throughout the race, just pitting when I need to and just missing all the wrecks. And it was definitely a fun and long race. I just needed to buy my time and be there at the end.
Yeah, that's for sure. You definitely made it happen, and I'll tell you what, taking home the checkered flag on your first ever race here with the league, that certainly sets a bit of a tone for yourself heading into USA International Speedway next week. You think that's a track where you can make it happen again?
Yeah, I feel like I'm pretty competitive there. I might just need to put in a couple more hours at that track, but because I've only had these cars haven't been out for very long, so just I don't think many people have a lot of time on any track with this car. So I just need to put in a couple hours there and see how we do.
Well, that certainly sounds like a good plan. And of course, I don't want to keep you from your celebrations for too long here, and I don't want to keep you from practicing for next week's event. So, Mr. Hahn, the microphone's all yours. Who do you want to thank for getting that 42 machine up here in Victory Lane?
I'd just like to thank my parents, my sister, my grandparents, just everybody that believed in me in real life racing and on here. They're all such a huge help.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yep, thank you.
And bringing it on home in position number 2, Mr. Shane Kohlmeyer. Got to make the same announcement I did just a minute ago. This is one of the surprise payout races by our friends over at Harpoon Design. So, both congratulations on the podium and congratulations on a nice little $5 bonus you're going to be picking up from the folks at Harpoon Design for your efforts tonight. What a race, though. How are you feeling now that you've got all of that under your belt tonight? Oh, uh, you're not coming through really clearly here. Well, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties here. You might just need to unplug and plug the microphone back in because it's being real wonky here. But that's okay. I'm not in a rush. Whatever it's doing, it's still doing it. All right. We're going to try this one again. He's restarting Discord, so hopefully that will fix it. Someone gave this man a faulty microphone, which is not fair to him. We'll give him just a moment here to see if we can't get him back up here in the broadcast booth and see if that doesn't fix it at all. In the meantime, though, I will go ahead and pull up Mr. Brandon Kiger, who finished back in the 3rd position. Give him a little bit of the talk while we wait to see if Kohlmeyer can fix his microphone. Brandon, what a crazy race it has been. What are your thoughts now that we have that 225 lap event under your belt?
I don't know if crazy is the word for that, man. That was a survival of the fittest, man. We survived. Really hate that for Tyler and Kenny there. I think Tyler was probably the best car of the whole race, and just had some late race incidents there to take him out of it. But that's part of racing. That's why you race all 225 and don't give up.
Yeah, and I definitely saw even near the end of the race, we had a couple of drivers park it down on pit lane, even with only a couple laps to go. But perseverance played key here tonight, and you made it happen. You got up here on the podium, and it's certainly great to be here to talk to you again. Next week, though, USA. How do you feel going to a substantially larger track than this one?
Um, USA, I think we had the best car there last year. Maybe not the best car, but I think we had the race one, and we had drive error there last year. It's going to be a new car. It's going to be a whole different setup to it. I feel good about it. I'm always good in USA and about anything. But with a new car, and we got a lot of new people racing with us this year, and it seems to be a little crazier than last year for sure. So looks like we're going to just have to survive again.
Yep, that sounds like the plan, but you survived here tonight, so I reckon you can survive USA. But
Yeah, we gonna try.
yes, sir. But for now, I'll let you go and celebrate your podium and get yourself ready for what is bound to be an equally hectic, but in quite a different way, race next week. The microphone's all yours, Mr. Kiger. Who do you want to thank for getting you up here on the podium?
Yeah, man, I'd like to thank Ghost Energy and Prime Hydration Drinks and Cody Norman for putting that good paint scheme on there, and Kenny and all them. We all worked together pretty good this race. I'd like to thank all them for working with us, and appreciate being back here to talk to you, Aiden, and thank you for what you do, and Matt and Steven for putting on this great league, and it's very, very enjoyable. Anybody needs to come out and join a good late model race, come on out.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, Brandon, and I look forward to seeing you at USA.
Thanks, sir.
And we are getting word from our second place driver, Mr. Shane Kohlmeyer. He might have gotten things sorted out. Shane, you got a copy on me?
Yes, I do.
Good deal. You got it sorted out. Shane, what a crazy race this has been. What do you think might have had to have played out different for you to get up and get the edge over Han in the last couple of laps?
The guy starting second, the 85 car, would have had to battle the 42 on the restart instead of not getting a very good restart. If he would have battled, I would have probably put it 3 wide on the back straightaway and went for it.
Yeah, especially at a race that has played out the way this one has, you might as well full send it. It's unfortunate that it didn't quite play out the way how you needed it to, but still a second place finish is no laughing matter, and that's going to be doing you some good favors on the point standings heading into next week. USA International Speedway, though, how you feel going into a substantially bigger track than this one?
Pretty good. I think that's one of my best tracks other than Martinsville. So I think I should be able to do at least top 3.
Well, I like the enthusiasm. I reckon you might be able to get it done. I do remember that last season USA was a bit of a chaotic race, but so was this one, and if you could make it happen here, I see no reason you can't make it happen there as well.
Yeah.
Of course, before I let you head out and celebrate getting your car up here on the podium here this evening, the microphone's all yours. Who do you want to thank for getting that 33 up here in the podium tonight?
Thanks to Harpoon Designs for making the Haas scheme. I really like it. And thanks for the league owners for letting me have a say in some part of the league.
Good deal. Well, as always, a massive thank you for coming out and a massive congratulations for your performance here tonight. And I look forward to seeing you at USA next week.
Yep. Thank you.
You heard it here first, race fans. Interviews with your top 3 finishers. Of course, like I said earlier, this is one of the surprise payout races put on by our friends at Harpoon Design. So, first place driver, Mr. Dylan Hahn, going to be taking home a $15 bonus courtesy of the folks over at Harpoon Design. And Shane Kohlmeyer going to be taking home a $5 bonus as well. And unfortunately, speaking of bonus, well, Mr. Tyler Jalbert, he looked like he was all primed and set up to try and take home the $40 lucky finishing bonus here tonight, but just didn't quite work out in those last couple of laps. He did get fortunate enough to roll the lucky finishing position as well, so Jalbert will be taking home a $5 cash bonus for his efforts. Not quite the $40 he was looking for, but a little something to consolate for the very unfortunate incident he was involved in earlier on in this race. Of course, though, before we sign it off for the evening, let's take a quick look down at our unofficial race results here at the Langley Speedway. What a crazy race it has been, race fans. But Dylan Hahn, a driver making his first ever start in Palms as a whole, not just this season, manages to take home the checkered flag. Shane Kohlmeyer finishing it just behind him. Brandon Kiger going to bring it on home, position number 3, with Will Salomon in the 36 back and forth, and Scott Bendix rounding out the top 5 in that Lucas Oil 88. 6th place going to go back to the Dropping Bombs driver of Mr. Mike Sukup, with Sean Patrick in the 17 finishing back in 7th. 8th place going to go back to Christian Tinkler, the rookie driver, in the 38, with Jonathan Emerson bringing it home in 9th spot in the 23 machine. Running out the top 10, that's going to be the 77 Harpoon design of Mr. Mark Whitley, with Chase Johnson bringing it home 11th, Leslie Ray Jr. back in 12th, Kenny Tripp 13th, and David Cannon 14th, and Mr. Johnny B rounding out our top 15 this evening. 16th going to go back to John Friley. Paul Hartwig Jr. going to go back to 17th. Tyler Jalbert, the driver that we have talked about so much this evening in the Tabletop Trio 04 entry, going to bring it home 18th. TJ Moon going to bring it home 19th in the 09 Little Caesars entry. Steven Rex back in 20th. Corey Blevins in 21st. And James Kugler going to be rounding out our main event here this evening. And just what a race this has been. It's crazy to think everything that went down here went down, but we managed to make it through it. And next week, heading on over to the USA International Speedway, a 3/4 of a mile track, almost double the length of this track. But it's going to be just as hectic, just as chaotic, and just as fun. So, of course, from everyone here at the Pro American Late Model Series and from the folks here at Harpoon Design, a big thank you for everyone to come out and tune into tonight's race. And we all hope to see you same day, same time, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for round number 4 of the Pro American Late Model Series presented by Harpoon Design. But for now, that's all we have here at Langley Speedway. Thank you all for coming out, and have a good rest of your evening, race fans.